Here's a silence inside the Grand Canyon that feels deliberate. The kind that doesn't just rest between the rocks, it guards them. Beneath the endless red walls and the echo of the Colorado River, there are places no map dares to mark. Caverns sealed in concrete, coordinates erased, reports buried under a century of denial. In 1909, a newspaper claimed explorers funded by the Smithsonian had discovered something impossible, a network of tunnels filled with relics of an unknown civilization. Days later, the story vanished. So did the names. For more than 100 years, whispers have returned. Restricted zones, sealed chambers, and sounds rising from miles below the stone. A heartbeat where there shouldn't be one. Maybe the canyon isn't just a monument to time. Maybe it's hiding time itself. Lock your doors, put on your headphones, because after this video, you'll never see the Grand Canyon the same way again. The Lost Caves of the Grand Canyon, the expedition that vanished. It began with a single article, page 7 of the Arizona Gazette, dated April 5, 1909. The headline read, "Explorations in the Grand Canyon. Remarkable discoveries indicate ancient people once inhabited vast underground caverns." The piece described a man named G.E. Kincaid, a former explorer traveling down the Colorado River in search of minerals. But what he claimed to have found wasn't gold. It was an entrance, a tunnel carved high into the canyon wall, hundreds of feet above the river. Inside, he said, were chambers filled with relics, copper weapons, hieroglyphs, and even mummified remains arranged as if in ceremony. Some looked Egyptian, others didn't look human at all. Kincaid claimed the Smithsonian had funded his expedition, and that Professor S.A. Jordan of the Smithsonian Institution oversaw the analysis. The story was written in the tone of fact. No exaggeration, no sensationalism. And then, like a page torn from history, it was gone. The Smithsonian denies it ever happened. No records, no artifacts, no expedition logs. Not a single trace of Kincaid or Jordan exists in the archives. It's as if both men, and the discovery itself, were erased. But that's where the story should end. It doesn't. Over the next century, whispers kept resurfacing. Hikers claimed to see strange openings in forbidden cliffs along the Grand Canyon's north rim, some sealed with concrete, others half collapsed but clearly carved by human hands. In the 1990s, a river guide named David Cooper photographed one such opening, perfectly square and positioned hundreds of feet up a sheer wall. 2 weeks later, the photo disappeared from his online archive. His account was deleted. Satellite imagery of the same coordinates shows nothing. A smooth cliff face, as if the canyon itself had been edited. And yet the area where Kincaid claimed to have entered, near Marble Canyon, remains closed to the public. The National Park Service designates it as a restricted research zone, citing safety and preservation concerns. No official studies have ever been released. Researchers who've tried to locate the Gazette's printing plates found that issue missing from microfilm in multiple libraries. Only digital scans survive, copies of copies, as though the paper itself resists preservation. Was it all a hoax? If so, why erase the evidence? Why seal parts of the canyon? And why do early Park Service maps printed in the 1920s list regions with names like Isis Temple, Tower of Ra, Buddha Cloister, and Temple of Osiris, Egyptian and Indian deities scattered across the rock like a coded memorial? Some geologists say those names were coincidence. Others believe they were a warning. In 2013, a team of climbers attempted to reach one of the forbidden coordinates. Their drone lost signal within 30 seconds of launch. When recovered, the footage was corrupted, except for the final frame, a dark recess in the cliff glowing faintly from within, as if light were coming from the rock itself. No one has tried again. Maybe the story of G.E. Kincaid was just turn-of-the-century journalism gone wild. Or maybe the canyon keeps its own kind of archive, one not written on paper but buried in stone, a library that erases anyone who dares to read it. The Arizona Gazette article ends with a single line, few people, quote, "Further explorations are to be undertaken once suitable arrangements are made to carry on the work." Those explorations never came. Or maybe they did, just not for the public. Because sometimes the easiest way to hide a discovery is to build a national park around it. But the tunnels weren't the only things sealed beneath the stone. The Colorado anomalies, maps that shouldn't exist. Every map tells a story, but not every story survives the editing. The Grand Canyon sits at the heart of the Colorado Plateau, a geological scar stretching across 4 states. It's one of the most photographed landscapes on Earth, and yet parts of it remain invisible, literally missing from official cartography. The first signs of the anomaly appeared in the early 1900s, when a group of surveyors from the U.S. Geological Service returned from an expedition near Marble Canyon. Their field notes mention something unusual: areas marked structural voids, as if whole chunks of land were absent from measurement. They filed their report, and then, like Kincaid's story, it disappeared. Decades later, in the 1970s, private pilots flying over the canyon began reporting strange interference when passing over certain coordinates: compass needles spinning, altimeters freezing, and radio static forming rhythmic patterns like coded pulses. Most of those reports were filed as instrument error, but the coordinates, every one of them, trace the same invisible line along the North Rim, a place the National Park Service now lists as a restricted research corridor. In 2011, a digital cartographer named Hannah Strickland noticed something even stranger. While compiling elevation data from NASA's ASTA satellite imagery, she found gaps in the canyon's LiDAR returns, rectangular sections of blank data cut out with surgical precision. Not random cloud cover, not transmission loss, just absence. When she overlaid her data on a publicly available topographic map, the blanks matched exactly with the so-called restricted zones. In her field notes, she wrote one line: "Someone edited the Earth." The most famous anomaly is a cluster of voids near Quagunt Basin, roughly 10 miles from the last confirmed coordinates of Kincaid's alleged discovery. Early explorer maps from the 1920s labeled the region the Forbidden Zone of the Colorado. Those words have since vanished from official park materials, but old prints survive in university archives, their ink fading but legible. Researchers who've tried to investigate the site often report the same problem. Drones lose GPS lock, compasses spin, and footage becomes corrupted. Even high-altitude imagery from Google Earth appears to warp when zoomed too close, as if the terrain folds in on itself. Skeptics call it a glitch in digital rendering, but the glitches always appear where cameras aren't allowed to fly. The Park Service maintains that the restricted zones protect fragile ecosystems and sacred tribal sites. But many of those same areas, long sacred to the Hopi and Navajo, were open to visitation as recently as the 1950s. Only after the Cold War began did the fences go up, the flights stop, and the maps change. One retired ranger, interviewed anonymously in 2006, said, "There are tunnels in there you could drive a train through, but they're not natural, and we're told to say they don't exist." Another researcher, a geophysicist who requested his name be withheld, claimed that during a 1994 survey, he detected magnetic anomalies beneath one of the sealed sections, readings consistent with hollow metal or dense basalt structures. He described it as something artificial, buried within something ancient. His report was later classified under environmental safety protocols. What makes these anomalies truly haunting isn't just the missing data, it's what the remaining data implies. Underneath the Grand Canyon lies one of the thickest sedimentary records on the planet. Nearly 2 billion years of Earth's memory stacked in stone. If someone, or something, carved into that record, it means we are missing more than history. We are missing context. Tag Canyon is supposed to reveal what time erases, but here time itself seems redacted. Maybe those maps weren't drawn to guide us. Maybe they were drawn to keep us from looking too closely. Because when you start tracing the blank spaces across the plateau, they form a pattern, a shape so vast it only makes sense from above. Not random voids, not error, design. Because sometimes the canyon doesn't want to be seen. The echoes beneath Marble Canyon, the canyon that breathes. Sound behaves strangely inside the Grand Canyon. It folds in on itself, bouncing between walls of stone older than bones, until it feels like the Earth is whispering back. But in 1996, a team of geologists discovered something that didn't sound like an echo at all. It sounded alive. That year, the US Geological Survey was conducting an acoustic resonance study along the canyon's eastern corridor, near the same restricted zones that appear blank on modern maps. They lowered seismic sensors into natural fissures to measure subsurface vibrations, expecting to find the usual hum of groundwater and tectonic shift. Instead, the sensors picked up a rhythmic pulse, 3 tones repeating every 11 minutes. Not random, not natural. At first, the team suspected equipment malfunction, but the pattern was too consistent, too deliberate. Each frequency aligned harmonically, forming what one technician described as a geometric sound, like a machine exhaling. When the data was reviewed at the USGS lab in Flagstaff, analysts confirmed the signal came from nearly 3 kilometers beneath the surface. There was no known fault line or magma chamber there, just solid rock, and yet the sound persisted for 72 hours before abruptly stopping. The official report was never released to the public. Only fragments of it surfaced years later through a Freedom of Information request filed by researcher Eleanor Price. One redacted passage remains legible. Acoustic pattern suggests cavity of significant size, exhibiting oscillation inconsistent with geological activity. In simpler terms, something was moving down there. Local rangers began to call it the canyon's heartbeat. They joked about it at first, until visitors started hearing it too. Hikers camping near Marble Canyon Bridge in the late 90s described a low vibration that passed through the ground at night, like the slow rhythm of a drum. Some felt it through their sleeping bags. Others said it shook the air inside their chests. The phenomenon faded by dawn, leaving no trace but silence and nausea, the kind that feels like vertigo from the inside. When a journalist from High Country News attempted to record it in 2001, her audio picked up nothing but static, followed by 2 sharp knocks, like someone tapping the microphone from below. Her recorder broke the next day. Theories multiplied. Some blamed subterranean rivers compressing air pockets. Others whispered about abandoned military experiments or deep geothermal pockets misidentified on survey maps. But none explained the timing, the frequency, or the fact that the vibrations seemed to respond to seismic equipment, increasing in volume whenever probes were lowered, fading when they were removed. In 2012, a private acoustics researcher named David Seeger returned to the site with updated instruments. He registered similar pulses, this time shorter 7-minute intervals, and almost musical in tone. When he tried to triangulate the source, his readings pointed to a location that no map lists, a smooth plateau directly above the first reported forbidden coordinates. He never published his results. In an email to a colleague recovered later, he wrote only, "I think we're listening to something that was never meant to be woken. Locals near the North Rim say the phenomenon comes back every few years. You can't predict it. You just feel it. A pressure under your feet. A hum too low to be heard but too heavy to ignore. Rangers say it's the sound of the earth settling. Elders of the Hopi Nation have another word for it, Sipapuni, the place of emergence. According to their tradition, it's where the first people climbed from the underworld into this world. The place where the earth still breathes. Scientists still call it anomaly, but the canyon doesn't care what we call it. It keeps breathing anyway. Maybe it isn't echo. Maybe it's memory, vibrating through 2 billion years of silence. And if the ground beneath Marble Canyon can hum like a heartbeat, then somewhere something must be listening. But if the earth can pulse you, what happens when it starts answering back?" The missing hikers of Kincaid's Trail. They followed the map that doesn't exist. The Grand Canyon swallows people. Every year, hundreds vanish into its labyrinth of cliffs and canyons. Most are found, some are not. But along one unmarked route, there's a pattern that doesn't fit accident or coincidence, a trail that shouldn't exist, and yet appears faintly on maps that were never meant for the public. They call it Kincaid's Trail, named after the same explorer who claimed to have found the Forbidden Caves in 1909. Officially, there's no record of any trail by that name. Unofficially, rangers whisper about it, a narrow path etched into the North Rim, visible only at certain angles of light, like veins beneath skin. The first disappearance linked to it was in the spring of 1989. A geology student named Thomas Hale was hiking alone, documenting mineral patterns near Marble Canyon. He radioed his supervisor just before sundown. "Found an opening in the wall that looks carved. I'm going to take a quick look." They never heard from him again. Search teams found his backpack 50 feet from the edge of a narrow ravine and a boot print leading toward the cliff. No body, no rope, no fall zone, just absence. Over the next 30 years, at least 9 hikers vanished in roughly the same radius, all within 5 miles of each other, all experienced, all equipped with GPS. In each case, their devices lost signal hours before they disappeared. Their final coordinates form a near-perfect semicircle around one of the canyon's most heavily restricted research areas. In 2003, a park ranger named Daniel Ruiz joined an unsanctioned night search with 2 volunteers, hoping to find remains from one of the missing hikers. According to Ruiz's later statement, they reached a narrow gorge where their compasses began spinning. A low vibration rose from the stone, the same pulsing tone recorded years earlier during the Marble Canyon acoustic anomaly. Then, Ruiz saw something impossible: a small, perfectly square recess in the wall, the size of a doorway. He described it as lit from within, like there was fire behind the rock. When he turned to call the others, the light was gone. The next morning, they found Ruiz alone, disoriented, with burn marks on his gloves and a radio that no longer worked. He resigned 6 months later. In 2014, a group of climbers from Flagstaff University attempted to retrace the rumored route using historical coordinates from the Arizona Gazette article. They live-streamed the expedition online for their geology club, brief, shaky footage of cliffs, wind, and laughter. 3 hours in, one of them pointed the camera upward toward a formation that looked like an opening high in the canyon wall. A voice off-screen said, "That's it. That's Kincaid's mark." The camera tilted. The frame went dark. The stream ended. Authorities found their camp days later, tents intact, gear scattered, no sign of struggle. Inside one tent, the camera had been left recording. The last minute of footage showed only static, and under the hiss, a faint rhythmic sound, 3 tones repeating every 11 minutes. The same pulse from 1996, the same heartbeat. The National Park Service closed the surrounding area permanently in 2016, citing geological instability and risk of collapse. No further searches were conducted. Even mentioning Kincaid's trail in official documents is discouraged. But still, new footprints appear. Hikers chasing rumors, researchers drawn by the myth, people who can't resist the idea that something is buried beneath the silence. And each year, the count of the missing grows. Some locals say the canyon doesn't take people, it trades for them, that the ones who vanish aren't gone. They're beneath, exploring tunnels they can't find their way out of, listening to something that's been calling them all along. The wind at Marble Canyon doesn't just move through air, it breathes. Sometimes when it's quiet enough, you can hear what sounds like a voice echoing through the stone. Not a scream, not even a word, just a single question repeating from somewhere below. Did you find it? But maybe they didn't fall. Maybe they were invited. The sealed chambers, concrete and silence. Every mystery has a lock. In the Grand Canyon, that lock is made of concrete. Visitors driving along the south rim rarely notice it. A fenced-off section of land with no trails, no markers, and no mention on the park's official website. To most, it's just empty terrain, but to those who've worked here long enough, it's known by a name that doesn't appear on any map: Section 7G. The restricted area was first sealed in 1956, after a geological collapse reportedly exposed subterranean voids of unstable structure. That's the official explanation. Unofficially, 7G is one of the only zones in the park surrounded by reinforced fencing and motion sensors. A single dirt road leads in, ending at a flat, vertical wall of concrete built directly against the canyon face. No doors, no windows, just a smooth grey barrier pressed into red stone, 40 feet tall and wide enough to hide a freight tunnel. Old aerial photographs show the wall being poured over several days by military engineers, not park staff. The trucks bore no insignia. The paperwork for the operation is stored at the National Archives. but the contractor name is redacted and the project title reads only Stabilization and Containment, South Corridor. Containment. Rumors about 7G began spreading among rangers in the 1970s. They said at night, you could hear faint metallic sounds coming from behind the wall, not echoes, but impact. Others reported a low hum, steady as a generator. Some said they'd seen condensation forming along the surface, as if the wall were breathing. In 2002, a researcher from Arizona State University named Dr. Peter Laskin received permission to conduct ground-penetrating radar tests in the area surrounding 7G. His findings were quietly published in a technical bulletin, then withdrawn within a month. Before it was taken down, readers noticed one sentence buried in the text: subsurface cavity of indeterminate origin located approximately 400 meters beyond containment barrier. Translation: there's something behind the wall. Freedom of Information requests filed in 2015 produced no further records. All inquiries are now met with the same response: no data available for that site. A retired helicopter pilot who worked search and rescue missions over the canyon in the 80s recalled being told to avoid flying over the zone entirely. They said the air was unstable. That was the word, unstable. But I've flown through monsoons, and that place was the only time my instrument screamed for me to turn around. Some researchers believe Section 7G was built to cap off a sinkhole or to contain hazardous material. Others think it hides the entrance Kincaid described, the mouth of the lost cave system, sealed permanently when the Smithsonian denied its existence. And a few, the ones who've stood close enough to touch the wall, claim to feel vibration beneath their palms. Slow, pulsing, like the canyon's heartbeat. Muffled. In 2019, a storm washed out part of the access road, exposing a few inches of rebar beneath the concrete surface. Underneath, witnesses said, was metal, not construction-grade steel, but something older, darker, almost black. The Park Service closed the area again within days. Satellite images were updated, the exposure blurred out. One ranger who patrolled the boundary for over 20 years put it this way: you can fence off a secret, you can bury it, but you can't make the earth forget it's there. Standing at the overlook above 7G, the air feels heavy. Birds don't fly over the zone. Even the wind shifts around it, curling away as if the canyon itself doesn't want to disturb what's beneath. Concrete cracks with time, so does silence. And maybe someday when the wall finally gives way to age and erosion, the canyon will speak again, in dust, in echo, in light, pouring from a door that was never meant to open. Because if the canyon is a wound, then Section 7G is the bandage, one that's starting to peel. But some doors weren't built to open. They were built to hold something in. The Grand Canyon and the Underworld map, where the Earth remembers. Long before explorers, maps, or fences, the Grand Canyon already had a name. To the Hopi, it was Ungtupka, the House of the Dead. To the Navajo, Tseyi, the place within the rocks. And to both, it was never just a canyon. It was an entrance. Their oral traditions speak of a place deep within the earth called Sipapuni, the portal through which the first people emerged from the underworld into this world. A spiral carved into stone marks the site of that emergence, representing the path between worlds. For centuries, elders have warned that the canyon itself breathes, that its walls expand and contract like lungs when the seasons change, that it listens. When Kincaid claimed to have found a city beneath the canyon in 1909, tribal historians said he was trespassing on something sacred, a realm not meant to be rediscovered. To them, the caves weren't ruins. They were arteries. In the late 1970s, anthropologist Dr. Thomas Keel recorded a series of interviews with Hopi elders from the village of Oraibi. One statement from that archive has never been published in full. What they call tunnels, we call the veins of the mother. They are not empty, they move, and when people go where they should not, the earth closes behind them. According to Hopi cosmology, the world we live in now, the fourth world, was born from the collapse of the third. Those who survived escaped upward, guided by spirits through a hole in the ground. That hole, they said, was the Grand Canyon. And someday, when this world grows sick, the same path will open again to take the survivors below. It sounds like myth, but satellite ground-penetrating surveys have confirmed the existence of massive caverns stretching miles beneath the plateau, natural cathedrals large enough to house skyscrapers. Scientists call them karst voids. To the Hopi, they are chambers of waiting, rooms of the ancestors, sealed until the earth decides to wake them. Modern researchers have noted another strange detail. Nearly every restricted zone in the canyon aligns along the same longitudinal corridor as the Sipapuni spiral, the oldest petroglyph in the region. It's as if the forbidden sites were built directly over the myth, or because of it. And then there's the hum. Locals near Marble Canyon say the low vibration that rattles the ground every few years isn't geological at all. They call it the returning breath. They believe the sound is the earth remembering, the old heartbeat from the world before this one. Some say the caves Kincaid found weren't tombs of an ancient race, but remnants of that earlier civilization, one that fell, was buried, and still moves beneath us. In 2018, a team of anthropologists from Northern Arizona University were granted limited access to survey a small section near the Little Colorado River, land considered sacred by multiple tribes. Their instruments recorded heat signatures and magnetic distortions beneath the surface. When they returned to publish, the paper was blocked by the Department of the Interior, citing cultural sensitivity. The lead researcher, Dr. Leland Hayes, resigned soon after. In a later interview, he said only, "Some things are meant to stay myths, especially when they're still breathing. Standing at the canyon's edge at night, you can almost believe it. The wind doesn't whistle here, it whispers. The air feels old, thick with dust and memory. And when lightning cuts across the sky, for a split second, the shadows along the walls don't look random. They look like doors. Maybe the Grand Canyon isn't a scar in the earth, but a memory of something far older, a map of where we came from and where we'll return when the surface finally forgets us. Maybe the forbidden zones, the sealed chambers, the vanished trails, they're not hiding what was found. They're hiding what's still waiting, because beneath all the rock and silence, there's a rhythm that never stops. It beats like the first breath of the world, and someday it might start breathing again. And if the canyon isn't just a place, but a memory, what happens when it remembers us back? 6 stories, 6 echoes carved into stone and silence. From the lost caves of 1909 to the sealed chambers buried in concrete, every layer of the Grand Canyon hides the same truth. We have no idea how deep our own history goes. The canyon is older than language, older than bone. It remembers things that don't fit inside time, civilizations, floods, and voices that never made it to paper. We built fences around it. We gave names to its shadows. We called it a monument, but maybe it's a message, because every map leaves something out, and every silence is a kind of protection. Maybe the secrets of the canyon were never lost. Maybe they're waiting for the right question, the right sound, the right person to listen. 6 stories, 6 layers of the same wound, and one truth whispered through all of them. The deeper we dig, the closer we get to remembering what we were never meant to find. If you made it this far, thank you. Leave a like if one of these stories stayed with you. Tell us what you think lies beneath the canyon and what should stay buried. But remember, some monuments weren't built to honor the past. They were built to hide it.